All right. Hey, everyone. Thank you so much, everyone, for coming out. Some quick shout outs. So, my buddy Jesse Chappelle is here. We've been friends since high school. Jesse lives in LA. Thanks for coming out, Jesse. We got David Luntz. Published him in my website, Ergot. Thanks for coming out, David. Michael Holt. Michael Holt is a fantastic author. I am a part of a press called 1111 Press, and we published David's book in September. And then David also has another book from Sublunary Editions, a novella. Michael, I'm sorry. A little nervous. Michael Holt, sorry. Michael's got a book on Sublunary Editions called The Seaside Hotel, a novella that came out about a year ago, right? A year ago, March. Thank you, David, for coming out. Thank you, Michael, for coming out. Thank you, David, for coming out as well. All right. Nick Greer, the publisher at Double Negative Press, who will be publishing the Veldt Institute in September, as you heard. And then, thanks again, Steve. So, I published, I wrote this in 2021. It's a novel. I sent it to Steve to read and exchange. He enjoyed it. He gave me some great feedback, and then he offered to publish an excerpt in New Sinews, which was, fantastic vote of confidence, and also just great to get something out in the world. This is a slightly different excerpt from the novel. The novel's sort of about this individual who is unnamed throughout the novel, and they find themselves at this institute in the midst of an apparently endless veldt. It's not exactly clear whether it's an institute for learning or a therapeutic institute, or what exactly is going on there. It's a little bit of all of these. And things progress. There's not much in terms of plot or character. It's mostly vibes. So keep an eye out for that, and then other double negative books. And this should be a tight 14. Give me a nod if we're at 12 or 13. All right. 3 sections. The Veldt Itself. From any of the windows of the Veldt Institute, one sees the fields of golden grass that flow out endlessly toward the horizon. The Institute is situated very specifically in a place from which no other human structures can be seen. Not only this, there are no roads visible, no antennae, no water towers, no junction boxes, no power poles or fences. Similarly, there are no prominent features, little rise to the land, no forests, no distant mountain ranges, no lakes or rivers, just the vast flowing veldt within which we are situated, seemingly at the very center. One can know, quite rationally, that the Institute might be anywhere within the veldt, even close to the veldt's edge. But when staring out of those windows, one comes to feel ineluctably that not only is the Institute at the center of the veldt, but one's very self is situated at the absolute center. When I first arrived, this feeling of centering was quite overwhelming. I kept away from the outer walls. If I was in a part of the Institute where this was impossible, I kept my back to the windows and faced the Institute's center. We have been taught that we are insignificant, that we live on an anonymous planet in an unsurprising solar system situated at the edge of a generic galaxy. Many find these layers of insignificance to be liberating. Emptied of the divine charge, one breathes freely. Being wrenched then into the center of things, into the exact center, is a jolt to the system that takes weeks, months, or decades to overcome. The primary task of the first doctor, Dr. Otto, is to catalyze this transition. Each new patient must move through this phase. Is this my word or theirs? Following a very specific and very personal path. It is up to Dr. Otto, who, though the newest and least experienced doctor at the Institute, is profoundly brilliant at his task, to find the avenue for each patient. He can work with only a very few patients at a time, as he must generate a totally novel method for each. Otto functions as the initial matchmaker and intermediary between the patient and the Institute. The patient determines his therapy, but not consciously. My own treatment under Dr. Otto, painstakingly devised to fit my demeanor, constitution, past, present, future, and myriad other specific criteria, involved spending an hour each day in one of the meditation rooms, rotating between viewing sculptures Chi, Beta, and Psi, and reading one page a day from a slim volume entitled Periodicity. One of my earliest, clearest memories in the Institute is of the last meeting I had with Dr. Otto, the only doctor who kept the blinds drawn in his office for our benefit. Much more the mother than the father, Dr. Otto eased us into the Veldt, took us from whatever came before, and set us firmly in this place. Dr. Otto had spent our session together simply listening. I had spent the time, as I had spent much of our time together, relating my past and releasing it to his care. It's an interesting phenomenon. When one relates their past in the Veldt, these memories that at one moment feel like a great weight, in the next, lift off and float away. One does not recognize at the time that once the past is gone, it is gone for good. After listening for an hour or more, Dr. Otto stopped me and prescribed spending time among the light of the Veldt, called here the Weltlicht. I would do anything Dr. Otto or another doctor recommended without question or hesitation, but the feeling I had after being given this prescription was one of immense trepidation. No, the feeling was fear. This may seem like a trivial matter, but some explanation is in order. It is widely understood by the doctors, and eventually by each patient, that the Veldt itself is the greatest teacher and healer. While the doctors bring incredible expertise to their respective fields, they are only ever using this knowledge as a means of interpreting the will of the Veldt. This is understood not as sleight of hand or mere symbolism. Rather, it is taken quite literally. The Institute's doctors have undertaken, as their life's work, an effort to translate their understanding of the Veldt into terms and methods which can be deployed onto and by the patients to facilitate their goals. Penumbric analysis and the topological dialectic, among other methods, are used by the doctors to bridge the gap between the endless space within and the endless Veldt without. I cannot claim to understand these practices or theories in the slightest, but there is no need. The doctors serve as intermediaries who fully understand the Veldt, who channel its healing properties and channel their superior understanding to patients. In this way, each phase allows patients to view the Veldt and their place in its absolute center in a different manner. The Veldt is impossible to describe or comprehend in its fullness. That is, of course, until one finishes one's course of treatment and leaves. Within the Veldt, and under the aegis of each doctor, one comes to see the Veldt incrementally more and more clearly until one reaches the precipice of understanding, the true expanse of the Veldt. Each of the doctors, I assume, has already reached this final phase, and only through superlative understanding is capable of at once entirely understanding the Veldt and continuing to live at its very center. With each phase of treatment, one's understanding of the Veldt grows, but even more so does one's ignorance of the Veldt. Similarly, one's understanding of one's own understanding and one's understanding of one's own ignorance grows. Publications. I arrived at a lull in my treatment today. I recently finished the volume I was reading and spent much of the afternoon searching through the shelves for the next. Listed here are some of the titles found on our shelves. A logic to the labyrinth, the absolute center, and it does not come, another rung. As we have been told, at the very center, beyond, beyond, the call of solid earth, the center wound, cruel artifice, the desiring illusion, endless gold, endless blue, future ash grander still, the inner valence, just visible, the logic of nothingness, seeking void, the shattering center, solitude, a luxury, purposes obscure, through nothing, an unseen peak within absence, yet more so. I read none of them. Final section, Solitude. On some afternoons, one may find that all the other patients are at work or on the paths or in the courtyard or doctor's offices, and that with no obligations pulling or pushing, one is settled into a lacuna. When I find myself in this situation, I typically walk through the rooms of the Institute, rather. So it was today. I found myself in solitude. The Institute was quiet. There was nothing I needed to do. Empty of bodies, the room seemed so large. I walked to a bookshelf and took down a volume, tan and blue, hardcover but thin. No more than 60 wide-margined pages. On the cover, in gold-embossed script, on anonymity. The publishing house was signified not by a name, but by an icon of a mask. The author was given as C.J.G. Aspen. I sat down and read it. I could follow the first few pages, but only from a distance. Soon I had plunged into a cacophony of ideas and could only scan the words. The pages confounded me utterly. Dr. Mellinger might say that the book sought me out. The fact that I pulled it from the shelf a sign that I was meant to read it. That I am exposing myself to this book at this moment suggests that I was seeking it out unconsciously, that it is carving out a place in my mind which will one day be filled with its meaning. That I cannot understand a word of it is the book goading my ignorance into showing itself. This is common with the lessons of the Veldt Institute, both those taught by the doctors and those held in the pages of the books. They take, at the very least, days to seek into one's consciousness. Often weeks or more are needed. The words spoken or printed float past one's eyes or in one ear and out the other. In the moment, the meaning of these books feels lost, forever out of reach, but a residue remains. That residue takes hold in one's mind like a burr, and under the right circumstances, that burr grows. While at the Veldt Institute, these residues accumulate in one's mind, and there is no telling when or where or why one or another of these may find fertile ground and germinate. Some ideas are like the eggs of a mollusk, which float along and then take hold and wait for another, often very different idea to come along, fertilize the original idea, and form a viable body. Others are like those smooth seeds that travel long distances between islands, floating dormant for years before washing up on a distant shore and settling in fertile soil there. I am struck by the possibility, no, a certainty, that there are ideas within me which will only see fruition long after my material body has rotted away. I finished On Anonymity in one sitting. Filled with symbols and technical language, it was more of a long scholarly paper than a book, exploring the idea of identity or lack of identity, but outside of any context I was familiar with. Whether this book was in reference to mathematical identity or the identity of one's person or some other more abstract definition, I could not tell. Some pages were just lists of equations. I recognized many of the individual symbols, a syllogism here, a turnstile there, but if meaning was produced when these symbols were strung together, I could not find it. I came to a point where I had to admit that either the equations were nonsense, or I had always misunderstood the meaning of these symbols. The search for meaning is a constant struggle, and freeing oneself from the struggle is one of the unintuitive tasks undertaken at the Veldt Institute. I imagine many of these texts are, through their very form, designed to push one further away from truth, or at least the truth as we commonly perceive it. That there are myriad other forms of meaning is clear, but calling these structures of importance meaning can only occur through allegory. Tired of reading, tired of anonymity, tired of solitude, I stand. I go to the outer doors of the Veldt and I step outside. The sun is high. The sun is always high. A light breeze blows. A light breeze always blows. I walk out into the grass. It is about knee-high, a light tan color. One can see the currents of the wind as they move over the grass. I decide to lie down in the grass. It is quite pliable, soft, and also supportive. Looking up, I see only the blue sky, with just a few faint wisps of clouds hanging motionless overhead. I am of the Veldt. I am of anonymity. I am of solitude. Lying in the Veldt, I am aware, consciously for the first time, of a hum, a drawn-out and long-distant sound from across the Veldt. I am aware of it. I realize that it has always been there, present just below the threshold of my awareness. Maybe I have blocked it out, consciously, unconsciously. On standing, the sound disappears. I can only hold on to it while I lie very still, and even then it is barely perceptible. The presence of this hum suggests that there is something else out there, something on the edge of the Veldt. It comes from all directions equally or from no direction at all. It is the sound of a great millstone, an engine deep within the earth, the turning of great cycles, the roaring of a distant fire. I see rings within burning rings. I see a faceless face with light pouring from its mouth and eyes like cataracts of blood. I see mute-faced angels dancing around a temple aflame, each singing a single endless syllable, the endless, unchanging name of God. Thanks.